Good afternoon. My name is Nina Kairouz, and I'm the Director of Media and Communications with IDC. Welcome to IDC 2017 Summit, American Leadership and Securing the Future of Christians in the Middle East. Welcome to everyone, our distinguished guests, Your Beatitude, Patriarch Rai, Your Beatitude, Patriarch Yazigi, our distinguished guests, and IDC members and members of the press. Every year, we start our summit with a press conference because we believe that leadership needs to be voiced, and we are blessed and lucky to be in the US, the country of free speech, where really press can support us, voice our concerns, and share awareness about this subject. So for all the members of press I bother all year through, thank you for being loyal and showing up today. You have 3 days to bother me again. It's your turn. And without any further delay, I give you IDC Senior Policy Advisor and Vice President Andrew Doran. But let me just say that after the Patriarch's remarks, we will have a brief Q&A with them, and then we will proceed with our speakers. So thank you again.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Your Beatitude. We're so honored to have with us today His Beatitude Cardinal Moran Mor Bishara Boutros Al Rai, the Maronite Patriarch, and His Beatitude John Yazigi, Patriarch of Antioch and all the East. I think when, in a moment like this, one feels overwhelmed welcoming such distinguished religious leaders from the Middle East, but we can very often forget that there are millions, over 5 million in America alone, of the flocks of these two great men, who are symbols of, not just symbols, but they personify continuity with the early church, with the very earliest origins of Christianity. And here in America, we are so far separated, it seems at times, from the origins of Christianity, from its birthplace. And this is very important to have two patriarchs from the ancient church in the 21st century among us here in the New World. They are more than symbols. The Christians of the Middle East are millions of them, living, breathing. They are bridges of peace in their communities, and they have a moderating influence across the region, and they have suffered so terribly, especially over the course of the last 15 years. They've suffered terribly for centuries, but it seems to be so accelerated in recent years, and so this question of American leadership becomes crucial because certainly minds may differ on this or that policy that might or might not have been undertaken, and this or that intervention that may or may not have been undertaken. But I think there can be no arguing that the consequences of the last 15 years in the Middle East have been nothing short of disastrous for the Christians of the region, and that the United States government needs to do more to protect the Christians of the Middle East. The Christians of the Middle East are our natural allies, not just of our government, but of the American people. There's a natural bond and affinity. The Christians of the Middle East are beacons of higher culture, of peace, of harmony between peoples in the Middle East. And we see what happens when Christianity is driven from the Middle East by extremism and terror. We see that the Middle East itself begins to look like a place that is uniformly fundamentalist. And so we have to stand arm in arm. And as an American Christian of European descent and extraction, it was only well into my life that I began to just the beginning of understanding the Christians of the Middle East, who are rich and diverse in their own right. And for those of you who've been to the Middle East from the West, you understand what wonderful hosts they are, how gracious they are, and frankly, in light of some of the imprudent policy decisions that our country takes some time, how forgiving they are. They're a people with whom we should stand as citizens of a civilized world that we hope to see arm in arm. And so it is my great honor to first hand the podium over to Patriarch Rai. Your beatitude.
Thank you. Thank you. Your Beatitude, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, America is a young country, full of hope, vitality, and idealism. The Middle East, for its part, is ancient, with many diverse cultures, but also cynicism and a history of bloodshed. In recent years, the conflicts that have beset the Middle East have driven out millions of its citizens, including so many Christians, and with their exodus, our region becomes more extreme, more dangerous to the outside world. Our worlds are, of course, very different, yet we share many of the same hopes for prosperity, security, but above all, for peace. Like all people, we look to America to lead the international community in so many ways. First, we look to America to help us solve the grave humanitarian crisis of so many refugees. 1.7 million Syrians, 500,000 Palestinians, and many Iraqis, whom we received in Lebanon in the spirit of solidarity. Yet Lebanon has borne this responsibility for 69 years with the Palestinians, for the Palestinian refugees, and over 6 years with the Syrian refugees. It has become a terrible burden at various levels: demographic, political, economic, social, environmental, educational, and security. Lebanon's constitution does not grant birthright citizenship. Therefore, Lebanon cannot bear the consequences of the refugees and the fear of their disguised settlement within its borders. We like to see the Syrian and Iraqi refugees rebuild their lives in their respective homelands. We hope the Palestinian crisis will be resolved soon, but not at the expense of Lebanon. It must be made clear that international diplomatic efforts aimed at resolving the Syrian crisis and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict must include Lebanon as negotiator partner, for the simple reason that Lebanon has many Syrian and Palestinian refugees. We look to America to exercise its diplomacy to resolve the many challenges in the region that had direct and indirect impact on Lebanon. While in recent years Lebanon has seen relative stability, it is still fragile peace. Lebanon's older generation remembers well the horror of war. They know that war must never be repeated. The youth of Lebanon, in particular, long for freedom and opportunity. Throughout our history, many of our challenges came from outside Lebanon, which has too often been manipulated by stronger powers. We have been abandoned to solve problems we did not create. Lebanon must be sovereign and stable, but we can only be so with your help. Finally, we look to America to help us negotiate permanent peace. This is the dream of all people who live in fear but long for peace. We seek friendship with those on our borders and beyond. It is here that our ancient world and your new world must encounter one another and begin to understand one another. We have a long tradition of pluralism in the Middle East, but in recent years we have been divided against one another. Christians are bound by our faith to love everyone, regardless of religious, ethnic, and cultural differences. How long can people look at one another in enmity, as hostages to fear? We cannot be divided against another and achieve lasting peace. The work toward peace requires more than governmental efforts. We need humanitarian assistance. This can be the work of NGOs, of writers, even of students. But above all, there is a role for Christians to be diplomats of the faith. Come to Lebanon and to the Middle East. Lebanon is a positive partner in the dialogue of cultures and religions. As Saint Pope John Paul II said, Lebanon is more than a country, it is a message to the East and to the West. We come to America today from the Middle East and ask you to bring your ideals and energies to work for peace. We in the Middle East welcome you with open arms, no longer as strangers, but as our friends, our guests, our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Beatitude, for those beautiful remarks. It's now my distinct honor to welcome Patriarch Yazigi, Your Beatitude, please.
صاحب الغبطة
Your Beatitude,
أصحاب السيادة
Your Eminences, Excellencies, brothers and sisters, and those who are present here.
أعبر أولاً عن فرحي الكبير بوجودي معكم
I express my joy for being with you
في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية
and my visit to the United States of America,
والتي كما ذكر صاحب الغبطة
which, as His Beatitude has indicated,
أيضاً نضم أصواتنا إلى بعضنا البعض
we bring our voices together
بأننا نتطلع إلى الحكومة في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية
for we look for the government of the United States of America
التي تدفع لإيجاد الحلول السلمية وإحلال السلام في العالم
to push for a peaceful settlement and peace throughout the world,
وبشكل خاص في منطقة الشرق الأوسط
and in particular in the Middle East,
وفي لبنان وفي سوريا
in Lebanon and in Syria,
وفي العراق وفي فلسطين
in
وفي
Iraq and
كل-
Palestine,
وفي كل أنحاء المنطقة
and all parts of that region.
رسالتنا أيها الأحباء نحن كمسيحيين، رسالة الكنيسة هي التي سمعناها يوم ولادة السيد المسيح من السماء.
Our message as Christians and churches that is given to us from the time of the incarnation that came from heaven.
عندما أتى ذاك الصوت من ملائكة من السماء: المجد لله في العلا وعلى الأرض السلام وفي الناس المسرة.
When the voice of the angels was initiated, glory be to God on high, on earth peace and goodwill amongst men.
فنحن نحمل هذه الوديعة، وديعة الإيمان.
We carry this trust of faith,
البشرى السارة،
the proclamation of the good news,
بشرى الخلاص،
the proclamation of
بشرى
salvation,
الفرح،
of joy,
بشرى الحق،
and of truth,
وبشرى السلام.
and of peace as well.
والكنيسة هي عمود الحق اللي
The-
منتصب وسط هذا العلم المضطرب.
The church is the beacon of truth in this agitated world.
وتبقى شاهدا لهذه الحقيقة حتى لو رفعنا على الصليب على شاكلة
And
سيدنا.
we will continue to witness to that truth even if we are hanged on the cross.
أريد أن أؤكد من هذا المنبر الكريم، نحن
I-
يا أحبة، تفضل.
I want to affirm from this podium, my brothers and sisters,
هنا في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية
here in the United States of America,
أننا نحن المسيحيين في الشرق الأوسط،
we as Christians in the Middle East,
نحن باقون هناك.
we are going to remain and stay there.
نحن ولدنا حيث شاء الرب أن نكون،
We
ونحن
will-
نعيش هناك،
We were born as God wished and we live there
وسنموت هناك أيضا.
and we shall die there.
كل ما يحصل وللأسف ونسمع كلمات غريبة علينا: إرهاب، قتل، تكفير.
Whatever we hear today from such statements, whether it is destruction, terrorism, or killing,
كل هذه الكلمات التي تحمل في طياتها الدمار والخراب.
all these such statements carry within them nothing but destruction.
قتل البشر والنفوس ودمار الحجر أيضا.
Killing people and destroying the stone.
فينا ننسى موضوع أخوينا المطرانين، مطرانين حلب.
We
المطران
cannot
يوحنا
ignore
إبراهيم
or forget
بولس يازجي.
our two brothers, the bishops, Metropolitan Paul and Metropolitan Johanna of Aleppo, Syria.
كم من العديد من الكنائس، الأديرة، الأوقاف تم تدميرها وحرقها وهدمها وإلى ما هنالك.
How many churches, monasteries, and missions that were destroyed and brought to destruction.
ولكن أؤكد لكم، رغم كل ذلك ورغم كل هذه الصعوبات والقساوة،
Despite all such difficulties, I would like to affirm to you,
كما ذكرت، نحن باقون
as I mentioned and I say,
لأننا متجذرون في تلك الأرض مثل أرض لبنان.
we are rooted in that part of the world like the cedars of Lebanon.
وبيقولوا عنا، اسمحوا لي هالمثل شعبيا، نقولوا يا جبل ما يهزك ريح، ثابتين، ما في شيء بيشيلنا من هون.
And nothing will take us away from that.
نحن يا أحبة في تلك الديار ما ضيوف، نحن أصحاب أرض وأصحاب حق.
We are not strangers in that part of the world. We are people of right and of truth.
ولذلك حيثما ذهبنا بيسألونا دوما عن الوجود المسيحي. نعم، هو سؤال يطرح.
Wherever we go, there is a question that is being asked concerning the Christian existence, and that is right and meet to be discussed.
ولكننا لا نستطيع أن نتصور شرق أوسط دون وجود المسيحيين، وهذا ما يقوله المسلمون في هذه الأيام.
But we cannot ignore the fact that without the Christians in the Middle East, there is no Middle East, and this is what is affirmed and confirmed by Muslims themselves.
بيحكونا عن أقليات وأكثريات، نحن ما لنا أقلية.
Today we hear about majorities and minorities. We are not minorities.
الدور اللي لعبه ونلعبه كمسيحيين
For the role that we play as Christians
لا يحسب بالتعداد 1 2 3 ومين بيطلع أكثر وأقل.
is not counted arithmetically.
ولذلك نحن نؤكد على دورنا.
We affirm our role and position.
نحن نؤمن بالعيش المشترك.
We believe in living together.
نحن رسل المحبة والسلام.
We are apostles of peace and justice.
ونحن ندعو الجميع اخوتنا المسلمين والجميع إلى التضامن والتكاتف لبناء البلد ولخير الجميع.
And we call all Christians and Muslims to work together for the well-being and the welfare of that country.
ونوجه أيضا من هذا المنبر الكريم الدعوة إلى كل المجتمع الدولي.
From this podium, we express a special invitation to the international community in the world
أن يعرفوا أولا أننا هذا ما هو نحن.
to know that this is who we are.
وأيضا أن يدفعوا لإيجاد حل سلمي لكل ما يحصل في المنطقة.
And to push for a peaceful settlement for whatever is taking place in that region of the world.
وعلي أن أنهي.
I conclude.
وأنهي قائلا بقول السيد هو في وسطها ولن تتزعزع.
Who says that I am in the midst and it shall not be overtaken.
Ladies and gentlemen of the media, we will now take a few questions. Sir.
Hi, I'm John Rossamondo with the Investigative Project on Terrorism. I'm interested in finding out if some of the cultural shifts in the West, against Christianity has impacted the cause of Christians in the Middle East in a negative way or encouraged indifferentism.
Sure. Do you want to? Could you repeat the question?
I was just wondering if some of the anti-Christian tendencies that have emerged in the past decade or two in the West have negatively impacted the cause of Christians in the Middle East in terms of getting the international community behind them.
بعض الفئات المسيحية اللي موجودة بالشرق الأوسط أدت إلى هالنوع من الوضع المضطرب الموجود هناك. هذا هو السؤال، إذا كان في أوضاع موجودة من قبل بعض المسيحيين اللي أدت لهالنزاع والمشاكل اللي عم.
هل بعض المسيحيين ساهموا؟ السؤال لكم هو إذا ساهموا المسيحيين.
Okay.
ما إذا ساهموا كانوا سبب.
All right. Okay. I was.
إيه اللي أدت يا.
My question. I'm gonna repeat. My question is, has the West been too indifferent to the cause of Christians in the Middle East?
Thank you. Thank you.
This is the question. إذا كان الغرب المسيحيين الموجودين في الغرب أثروا على هالوضع يلي عم يعانوا فيه المسيحيين في الشرق. هذا ما أثبته.
Right here. Yes, right here.
Hello, Alan Dragan with MTV Lebanon. So was it a lack of communication between the churches between Iraq and Syria and Lebanon and Palestine? That's why probably we've seen many groups migrated without they had to face horrible consequences. Were there any solid communication between the churches, the Christian churches in the Middle East? هل في هنالك كان في اتصال دائم مع الكنائس المسيحية بين سوريا والعراق وفلسطين ولبنان مشان يتجنبوا بعض المصايب اللي صابتهم، وهالمساعدات اجت بشكل سريع. البعض منهم تهاجر كليا من المنطقه. ربما لو كان في تواصل يعني تواصل يعني اكثر فعاليه، ربما كانت جنبنا بعض المصائب الكبيره بالمنطقه يمكن. عم
بيسأل إذا كان في تواصل بين الكنائس في الشرق الأوسط. ما في تواصل، في مجلس كنائس الشرق الأوسط وفي شغل مع بعضنا وفي.
We answer to the two questions.
Please.
إذا كنا فهمنا السؤال الأول، إذا كان مسيحيي الغرب ساهموا بما يجري في الشرق الأوسط. هون المشكلة إنه دائما بيعتبروا بالعالم إنه الغرب يعني مسيحيين. لا، الغرب منا يعني مسيحيين. الأمر السياسي شيء والأمر المسيحي شيء. أنا ما في أقول أبدا إنه مسيحيي الغرب ساهموا بالحروب القائمة في سوريا والعراق واليمن وفلسطين. يعني جوابي بالنفي.
If you are asking if the Christians of the West have contributed to the wars that are waging in the East, my answer is no. Because now in the West, they're supposed to be Christians, but this is not the reality.
بالنسبة لتاني سؤال هل كان مثل ما فهمنا، هل في علاقة بين المسيحيين بالشرق الأوسط على تنوع كنائسهم؟ هذا كان السؤال. طبعا نحن العلاقات على مستوى الكنائس الكاثوليكية الأرثوذكسية البروتستانتية نحن على تفاهم كامل، ومن وقت لآخر بنعمل اجتماعات دورية وبنعمل اجتماعات عند الحاجة بالتليفون، وبنتناول وبنحكي وبنجتمع. حتى عنا لقاءات مع القيادات الإسلامية، رؤساء الأديان الإسلامية كمان عنا معهم قمم مسيحية إسلامية. على المستوى الديني بين رؤساء الكنائس والمسؤولين في الأديان في الدين الإسلامي في الطوائف الإسلامية نحن على تفاهم كامل. المشكلة على مستوى آخر، مستوى السياسي.
The second question concerns the relationships between the Christians among themselves in the Middle East. The answer is yes. We have a great deal of interaction between the churches. We meet often, and there is also a meeting at the level of the Middle East Council of Churches where all the Christians of the Middle East, Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant, and all the families of churches in the Middle East, they meet together under the umbrella of the Middle East Council of Churches, and also the Christians and Muslims come together on occasions. And in Lebanon, there's constant interaction and communication in all sorts of ways between the heads of the Christian churches and the heads of the Muslim denominations.
بكل الشرق الأوسط.
Just follow up question. إذا كانت هي مشكلة سياسية لا تأخرت تطلع مجموعات مثل IDC لتدافع عن حقوق المسيحيين بالشرق بالناحية السياسية لتأمن لهم كل المساعدات، إذا كانت هي المشكلة سياسية فقط.
So can you ask that also in English?
So why we was too late to witness groups such IDC to become to life so it can defend the rights for Christians minorities in the Middle East if the problem precisely is political.
ليش تأخروا هالقد ليحكوا ليكون في ليش ما اجى شيء مبادرات
ما تأخروا
Andrew, excuse me. The question is why was it delay having any political organizations like IDC to start advocating for this issue if it was political?
Yeah, and I'm grateful to answer that question. I gave a talk recently about this subject to a small Catholic group. You know, if you go back to 2001, 2002, 2003, and read a lot of what was being written in the run-up to the Iraq War, there was very little that was written about Christians in the Middle East. Among the American people, I think that is because there was a legitimate ignorance, and I don't use that in the pejorative sense of the word. I just mean that there was quite simply not a knowledge. To this day, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, there is still insufficient knowledge and certainly insufficient understanding among the American people about Christians in the Middle East. In the aftermath of 2003, I think it's certainly safe to say that awareness began to rise. And certainly by the time ISIS arrived on the scene, ISIS's particular targeting of Christian communities for extinction, which is a campaign that continues, incidentally, beyond Iraq and Syria and in places like Egypt. This began to heighten the awareness of the American people. I think that there are a number of contributing factors. Some of them have to do with the great geographic and cultural distance between American and Middle East Christians, but I think also there is the if the question is why wasn't there advocacy sooner for Christians in the Middle East, I think there are a variety of answers to that question. One of them is quite simply a lack of unity, insufficient unity, and we founded this organization to try to forge unity among Christians, and not just among Middle East Christians, the sort of unity that we see here today, but unity between American Christians and Middle East Christians, and even beyond this, among those who may be secular-minded in the West, and a greater understanding for Christians so that they can see how rich and important this culture, this Christian culture in the Middle East is, and why it must be preserved. Sayyidina. Yes. Your beatitude, please. Of course, your beatitude, please.
مسموع هذا السؤال. لا أنا بس اسمحوا لي أن أضيف على ما ذكر عن السؤال السابق يعني فكرة صغيرة.
Allow me to add more concerning the first question that was raised.
أحيانا معينة بيصورنا البعض بالطريقة اللي بيريد فيها، وبتكون هي صورة ما بتتناسب مع حلاوة الوضع اللي نحن بنكون فيه رغم كل أحيان السلبيات اللي عنا.
Sometimes the media may portray us as in a negative way, not exactly the picture as we actually portray.
الميديا وأحيان قوى ما في هذا العالم من قوى هذا الدهر يقومون بذلك.
Its powers in this world, including the media as well.
فالسؤال إذا نحن في الشرق الأوسط الكنايس قريبين من بعضنا وإلى آخره، شكرا على السؤال مهم جدا، ولكن بقول ما نسمع في الإنجيل بقول تعال وانظر.
The only question that is to come and see.
شايفيننا مع بعضنا. أنا بزوره لسيدنا البطرك ببكركي وبزورنا ما هيك بشكل دائم ونحن مع بعضنا على طول بالطبع.
We have constant visits and meetings together with his beatitude
ومع كل الإخوة البطاركة
and with all other
الكنائس.
patriarchs and churches in the Middle
ولكن
East.
أريد أن ألفت النظر إلى نقطة كتير مهمة عندما نتكلم عن حماية أو الدفاع عن المسيحيين في الشرق الأوسط بشكل خاص نتيجة ما يجري وبشكل عام.
And what I would like to say in particular concerning in defense of Christian in the Middle East and in Syria and Lebanon in particular.
يأتي إلى خاطري ما قاله أحد أبنائنا اللبنانيين المسيحي الأرثوذكسي، كان مشرقي الهوى وأرثوذكسي الإيمان واللبناني الجنسية في الأمم المتحدة أيام الحرب اللبنانية اللي لا تنذكر ولا تنعاد.
It brings to mind one of the Orthodox politicians who in the United Nations mentioned something concerning the war that it should not be repeated.
وقف في الجمعية العمومية بالأمم المتحدة وقال، كان ممثل لبنان في الأمم المتحدة وبيد نفس القول، دعوا شعبي يعيش.
And he said in the United Nations, let my people live.
أعطونا السلام يا أحبة، أنتم خطاب لكل دول العالم وكبار وأهل القرار في العالم، أعطونا السلام ونحن مندبر حالنا مع سيدنا ماشي الحال هذا.
Give us peace and we can take care of our own and our
ما في
situations with this
سلام
beatitude.
لمسيحيين في لبنان إذا ما كان في سلام للمسلمين في لبنان. هذا كيف بده يصير؟
Peace among
أعطونا
Christians.
تفضل.
Peace among Christians has to be also accomplished with a peace with the Muslim community.
أعطونا السلام وبعدين نحن بعتقد نؤمن كلنا بالعيش المشترك وأمورنا كلنا مستقبلنا هو مستقبل واحد.
Give us peace and we can take care of all our issues.
Thank you, Your Beatitude. We have time for one more question. Ma'am.
Hi, I'm Penny Starr with Breitbart News. President Trump has talked about creating safe zones in places where Christians are threatened by ISIS and other forces. Will they comment on what they think if this will work to keep refugees from fleeing, as he spoke about in Lebanon and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think if it's okay, I'll field that one because I think we're a little bit behind on time, and there has been a great deal of back and forth in translation. Certainly, the humanitarian situation is very grave. I think it's safe to say that U.S. policy on this question is being driven not so much by humanitarian considerations, so much as what is regarded as a national security situation that once this began to bleed into Europe, suddenly the West began to take notice. I think it's safe to say that the West has begun to experience this or understand this in a way that Lebanon begins to understand it. There are a great many, there's a great diversity, I think, of opinion with respect to safe zones, protected zones, safe areas, how are they internationally monitored. I think as far as our organization goes, we certainly believe very, very strongly in protecting the dignity and safety of refugees. And this is something that I think if you go to Lebanon, you see how Lebanon has, as Patriarch Rai mentioned, welcomed refugees with open arms. But to give this some context for the United States, if the United States were to absorb something along these lines, it would be something like 150 million people coming in to our country and needing care. So this is how pressing this is for a small country like Lebanon, which has absorbed so much of the difficulty. I don't think that it's necessary to put either Patriarch on the spot to answer a political question. I think it's probably best for them to answer this with respect to the spiritual, humanitarian, and moral necessity of protecting the refugees, of wherever they may be, and seeing for their safe return where they may be returned safely. And I hope that answers your questions.
I was just going to say that you were talking about their well-being, and so and that the dangers of leaving these areas, and wanting to rebuild in their own homeland.
Yeah, absolutely, so and that is certainly a concern for all people of goodwill and for the international community such as it is, to see that these displaced people, wherever they may be within their own borders or outside their borders, that their dignity and safety is protected. This is of paramount concern. I do think that we have seen throughout history the dislocation of people from their own rootedness in their own homeland tends not to have very positive consequences. And I would even say that even for the Christians of the Middle East who are living in this country, you certainly see, and this is common among many immigrants in America, but this longing for those roots, for the homeland, for where one came from. And so I think in that sense, all of us, certainly who are Americans, especially those of us whose grandparents, as mine did, came here as refugees, we certainly understand how difficult this situation is, and we urge the Trump administration to see a swift and humane response to this terrible crisis.
Andrew,
Thank you.
About the idea of a homeland? Time that I have spent in Lebanon and also in Syria. I've talked to many leaders and many Christians there, and as you know, here in the United States, there's been this push for a possible homeland for Christians in Kurdistan and even parts of Syria. If there's a Balkanization of Syria after the war, what do these two Beatitudes feel about that? And the spiritual, not the political, but the spiritual implications of that.
I think, and I will, I will field this one instead of the patriarchs answering, because in the interest of time, we certainly don't want to see, the term balkanization is of course one that does have a pejorative context for many people. In the West, we have a tendency, especially since let's say the 17th century, to think of things in terms of nation states. We have difficulty, I would say, even policymakers, even the best and the brightest inside the Beltway, of understanding what they're looking at politically, culturally, socially. When they look at a map of the Middle East, they want it to be neat and simple, and it's not. These are very complex, ancient, diverse communities who have lived side by side in peace for centuries, and indeed millennia. And what we have seen is the fundamentalist, violent extremist tendency is to divide, is to demand uniformity. And so certainly it would be, I think what the patriarchs would say is that they want, as Patriarch Yazici said so eloquently, that the Christians wish to live and die in the Middle East. I would hope that all political constructs across the region, whatever form they may take, will respect original peoples, first peoples of the region, respect their ethnic, religious identities, and permit them to form political community and social and cultural community, such as they may do to survive in the region. And yes, your beatitude, please.
كمان اسمحوا لي هيك ملاحظتين صغار. هي مواضيع كتير مهمة ويطول الحديث عنها.
Two observations that his beatitude would like to also share.
الأمان والعيش بطمأنينة هذا حق لكل إنسان ولكل الشعوب.
Living in security and in peace is a right for all the people in the world.
وهذا ما نرجوه وما نأمله أن كما كنا في سوريا وفي لبنان وفي فلسطين وفي العراق وفي اليمن وفي مصر وفي كل بلدان الشرق الأوسط وفي كل العالم إنه الناس كلها تعيش بأمان وسلام.
This is what we want to see, whether it is in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, in Jordan, in Palestine, in Iraq, or in other wars in the region.
للأسف كلنا عم نسمع أنه صار يد الإرهاب والتفجير والقتل عم تطال أشخاص أيضا بريئين في أماكن أخرى بأوروبا، يوم بباريس ويوم بإسبانيا ويوم بمدريد ويوم بألمانيا وإلى ما هنالك.
And we hear that the hands of terrorism is even stretching, extending to people who live in Europe, in Germany, France, Italy, and London and other parts
ما في
of
شك
Europe.
نحن نريد الجميع أن يعودوا إلى بيوتهم بطمأنينة وأمان وسلام، وحتى السوريون الموجودون في لبنان ما هيك نرجو أنه كل واحد يرجع على بيته.
We all want people to go and return to their own homeland.
ولكن بريد أكد لكم يا أحبة وأيضا هنا في الستيت أننا وكمسيحيين بشكل خاص أن نؤكد على ما يلي.
I want to affirm as Christians as exactly the following.
أنه الحديث عن الإثنيات
To talk about ethnic groups
والقوميات
and nationalities
والطوائف
and denominations
وإلى ما هنالك
and other
هذا
separate issues
هذا لا يناسب المسيحيين أولا.
does not fit the Christians to begin with.
نحن نريد لبنانا واحدا.
We want Lebanon to be one Lebanon
سوريا واحدة كل آمنة.
and one Syria united
and عراق واحد
and
آمن.
one united Iraq.
وهكذا. وأرجو الانتباه كثيرا لهذا الموضوع إذا كنا نريد أو نتكلم عن حماية المسيحيين.
This is very vital if we were to talk about the defense of Christians.
وإذا بدي
in
أكون
the East.
جريء أكثر من ذلك أريد أن أقول على الأقل فيما يتعلق بمصيرنا في بلادنا أنه لنا قول يعني ولو.
And I dare say that if we are talking about our destiny in our land,
لنا قول.
We have something to say.
عندنا رأينا، نحن أصحاب البلد ونحن اللي عايشين.
We have our own opinion. We are the people who live there.
اسمحوا لي أقول نرفض حلول معلبة مدري من وين بتجي ومطلوب إنه مثل ننفذ أوامر.
Allow me that we are not in a position to accept any solutions that are given or imposed on us.
فنحن موجودون ونلتقي هنا ونلتقي مع الجميع لكي نسمع.
We meet here and everywhere expressing our own words and concerns.
ولكن نرجو الآخرين ما يعتبرونا بس تلاميذ علينا نسمع وهن يحكوا.
But we do not want to be reduced as being only listeners to what is dictated on us.
ولكن أيضا هن يسمعونا أيضا.
That they should also hear us what we have to say to them.
نحن بنتشكر كل الذين يحبونا والذين يعملون من أجل خيرنا وخير بلادنا.
We are grateful for all those who love for the welfare and the well-being of our country.
ولكن من حقنا أن ننشد وحدة بلادنا.
It is our right to seek unity of our own
ومن حقنا أن يكون لنا قول في مصيرنا وفي مستقبلنا.
And our rights is to express our own destiny and our own plight.
شكرا.
Thank you. Thank you. I think your beatitude, please.
أنا في عندي نقطتين بحب كمان إني أحكي عنهم. بدي أشكر سيدنا البطرك على اللي تفضل فيه.
I'd like to add 2 points. First, I wish to thank His Beatitude for all what he said.
دايما بيقولوا الدول لازم المهجرين والنازحين يعيشوا بكرامة محل ما هم.
We hear it always that displaced and refugees ought to be given a chance to live in dignity wherever they may be.
بينما هم رفضوا يفوتوا على بلدانهم، وقفوهم على مداخل بلدانهم تحت الشتاء وتحت حر الصيف، كبار وصغار وأطفال. وين كرامتهم؟
Those nations have closed their borders and have prevented those people from entering into their countries, and they left them under the rain and in the snow. Where is the human dignity in all that?
إذا العائلة قاعدة تحت الخيمة أمنت لها أكل وشرب، أعطيتها كرامتها؟
If the family is living under a tent and you've given that family something to eat, do you think and do you feel that that's enough for their human dignity to be safeguarded?
إذا بدهم فعلا كرامة بشرية بيسارعوا لإيقاف الحرب بسوريا وبالعراق، وبيسارعوا إلى يرجع هالشعب إلى أرضه بكرامة ويعيش بكرامة بوطنه واللي جبله بعرق جبينه.
If they really want human dignity, the first thing they have to do is stop the war and allow those people to go back to their countries, the countries they have built and the civilizations they have built together, in order to be able to live there in dignity.
بس مع الأسف الطريقة اللي فيها هجروا هالشعوب من أرضهم ونكل فيهم وبقيوا على هالطرقات كبار وصغار، مريض ومش مريض. هيدي بيّنت إنه اعتبروهن غير كائنات بشرية.
Unfortunately, the way those people were left on the roads, were left under very difficult circumstances, says that deep down those people were not considered even as human beings.
تاني نقطة كان في سؤال أجاوب عليه بإيضاح. هل تأخرنا؟ أنا بدي أقول إنه نحن كبطاركة ورؤساء طوائف إسلامية كنا دائما عم نتنادى من الأول الحرب اللي بدأت بالعراق وبسوريا، نتلاقى ونطالب بالسلام ونطالب الأمم المتحدة والدول حتى تتدخل وتوقف الحروب. مش هلأ بدأنا.
As a reply to the question which asked why didn't anybody think of starting something like IDC before, His Beatitude is saying, since the very beginning of the war, we, the patriarchs, and all the heads of churches and religious denominations, we raised our voice and we wanted the war to stop. And we tried to tell the world that the fate of Christians and the fate of all those countries are in jeopardy.
ونحن كبطاركة نحن ومع سيدنا وغيره بحركة مستمرة بهالعالم بيدعونا ومنحاضر ومنحكي وبعدين مع الأسف السمع ضعيف.
We as patriarchs have been going all over the world, and His Beatitude went to the UN as well, and we have been telling the world about all those problems, but unfortunately our talks are falling on deaf ears.
كان في سؤال ما جاوبنا عليه بيقول هل علمنة الغرب جعلتهم غير مبالين بواقع وصرخة المسيحيين بالشرق الأوسط؟ رح نجاوب عليه بسرعة.
Apparently there was a question which said, is the secularism of the West responsible for not intervening to help the Christians in the Middle East?
نحن مشكلتنا مش مع الشعب، مع الشعوب، لا مع الشعب الأمريكي ولا أي شعب. الشعب متفهم أقله إنسانيا. المشكلة إنه السياسات بالدول ما بتعطي قيمة للمسيحيين بالشرق الأوسط، بمعنى قيمة لمعنى وجودهم وحضورهم.
Our problem is not with the populations of the countries. Our problems are with the politicians who do not give enough value to the Christian presence in the Middle East.
لأنه الدول بتطلع إلى مصالحها الاقتصادية واستراتيجية، ما بيطلعوا إلى قيمة الوجود المسيحي اللي تحكي عنه سيدنا البطرك. حياتنا مع المسلمين 1300 سنة، بنينا سوا ثقافة مشتركة وحضارة واعتدال. هيدا ما بيعطوا قيمة الدول، بيطلعوا على البترول، بيطلعوا على شيء بخصهم لاستراتيجيتهم، ويا للأسف بس هذا بيدفعوا ثمنه هلا. تفضل سيدنا، إذا بطل يكون فيه الحضور المسيحي له تأثير، هذا بيأثر على السلام ليس فقط في الشرق الأوسط، بالعالم.
The countries don't care about the Christian presence, nor about the effect that the Christian presence has on those civilizations. The politicians and countries have interests. They try to find where they can get petrol, money, and everything else, but they forget that if the Christians disappear from the Middle East and the civilization that Christians and Muslims have built together, this will lead to a disastrous situation, not only for the Middle East, but also for people all over the world, because the Muslim moderation will disappear. The Christian presence in the Middle East had a great effect on Islam and impacted Islam in the sense that it has made it more moderate than in any other places where Christianity does not exist.
Thank you, Your Beatitude. Thank you, Your Beatitude. Thank you, Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief 2-minute break as the patriarchs exit the stage, and then we'll be joined by IDC's partners, the Armenian National Committee of America, the Institute for Religion and Democracy, and the Philos Project. So please stay with us for just 2 quick minutes. Thank you. We're going to begin the second part of our program. IDC is very proud to have with us our three partner organizations, the Institute for Religion and Democracy, Mark Tooley, president here, Aram Hamparian of the Armenian National Committee of America, and Robert Nicholson of the Philos Project. Each of these organizations really believes in engaging in the Middle East in the right kind of way and balancing our sometimes abstract notion of rights and human dignity with practical and pragmatic policy proposals. And in the midst of all that, advancing the interests and values of the American people, which we believe to be very much in sync with protecting Christian communities in the Middle East. And so our first distinguished panelist is Aram Hamparian, Executive Director of the Armenian National Committee of America. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to first join in marking a remarkable year of purpose and progress by In Defense of Christians. 12 months of grassroots organizing across our great country with all its wonderful diversity, building chapters and activists and allies. That's hard work. It's not seen, but very important. 12 months of consensus building across parties and political divides. At this particular moment in our nation's life, that's not always easy, but IDC has always kept issues of religious freedom, particularly religious freedom abroad, above the political fray, and for that, IDC deserves great credit. 12 months of policymaking across our government with a solutions-driven approach dealing with Congress, the administration, the media, and coalition partners. In large part, because of the work of IDC, we have today turned an important corner. IDC has helped reframe the debate on Capitol Hill and even in homes across our country. But a lot of work needs to be done. We see that on the ground back home in the region. I'm reminded of an old saying that I heard when I was young, and I didn't quite understand it, but I've come to appreciate it more over time, which is that we may not get everything we work for, but we will surely have to work for everything we get. Those are truly wise words. IDC has accomplished a lot. Not everything that we've set out to do, none of us have, but we've made a lot of progress. It's all been the result of hard work and cooperation, service, and sacrifice. The issue of IDC's birth was raised earlier. Why not earlier? Well, in many ways, as was discussed by the clergy, IDC was a response to a crisis, a response in some ways to ISIS. But at a deeper level, IDC is America's answer to a century of indifference. America's answer to a century of indifference, even worse, empty rhetoric by our government, by presidents of both parties, by our foreign policy establishment. My friends, for far too long, for all the talk that we've heard, far too many here in a nation founded upon the ideals of religious liberty, far too many have doubted whether our government would actually stand up for Christians and other at-risk religious minorities around the world. For many years, against every American instinct, we were told, well, the American people don't care. IDC has shown that they do, and they always have. Along the way, some may have lost hope. Others may have remained silent. But when IDC has issued the call, they have answered. And let me tell you, we are just beginning. We are just beginning. Much, much progress lies ahead. We were told, well, the politicians won't act. And again, IDC has demonstrated that they will. That's a result not just simply of hope or aspirations or dreams, but of smart organizing and offering solution-driven approaches that speak to American values and American interests. And finally, we were told, well, even if the people do care, even if the politicians give us rhetoric, what difference can we make? And IDC has shown again that you can make a difference. And look at all the issues on the IDC agenda. Look at the support for Lebanon, to promote Lebanon's security and stability in the wake of this huge influx of refugees. That's a real problem, and IDC is proposing real solutions and actually moving the ball down the field in implementing those solutions. Emergency relief for victims of genocide in Iraq and Syria. Again, IDC is out front, engaging with politicians, working with policymakers, and securing progress in a very, very difficult environment. A point on the agenda that's very, very close to my heart as an American of Armenian heritage, the Armenian genocide and American remembrance, honest American remembrance of that crime. It speaks to me very deeply, and especially on the issue of diversity and pluralism in the Middle East. My own family was welcomed in Arab lands. So many Armenians were saved from certain death by Turks or Kurds, welcomed into Muslim homes. A region that was rich in diversity and that was marked by tolerance and pluralism. That was our past, and it can be our future. The genocide issue, I think in many ways, is like a bellwether of how America deals with all of our issues. It's a test of sorts. American recognition of the Armenian genocide is not a cure-all. It's not a panacea. The honest remembrance of that crime would not solve the other issues or problems before us, but it would signal that our country is serious about honestly addressing these issues. And that really, really matters, because the signals that we send around the world are important. If we have a billboard above our U.S. Capitol or a billboard above our White House that says human rights can be bartered, right, set your price and we'll deny your genocide, then we're signaling the world that we're really not serious. For all the talk, for all the speeches, for all the rhetoric, it's hollow, and that really matters. Will we, as a nation, enforce a foreign government's gag rule? Will we grant foreign dictators a veto over what we can and cannot say about human rights? That's a judgment about us. We sometimes cast judgment upon others. We say that this group or that group in this part of the world is doing things wrong. Well, let's also look to ourselves and say, can we abide? Can we live with ourselves, right? Can we do the right thing? There's two pieces of legislation. One calls upon America to draw upon the lessons of the Armenian genocide to prevent future atrocities. The other says Turks and Armenians can and should get along, and of course they should. But that's going to be upon the basis of a truthful, just resolution of the genocide that so bitterly divided these two peoples. I'll turn now to the last item on the agenda, which is, I think the most fundamental, the core issue, and I think it's very, very important. And I know that Andrew will talk about it throughout the conference, and that is the question of accountability, the alignment of our interests and our values. The core question is the core question of who are our allies, right? Can we, as a nation, reject the false promise that we advance our interests by abandoning our values, right? Is that the deal we make with the world, that we think that we will move forward somehow by making one more trade-off, one more compromise, one more act of appeasement, and then guess what? Things will get better. No, guess what? We're just digging ourselves a deeper hole every time we compromise our values, thinking that it's going to somehow advance our interests. It's not. That is the lesson of history. I don't need to remind each of you in this room of that. IDC is truly, and I think really powerfully and transformationally, and closing the gap between what we believe as Americans, what we say as Americans, and what we do as Americans. Fundamentally, IDC is about elevating the U.S. response to suffering, to threats to faith, threats to democracy, threats to diversity, elevating the U.S. response from the political level, right, where it exists today, to a moral plane. When we act at the moral plane, when we act with a sense of moral imperative, of a clear understanding of right and wrong, we'll do the right thing. And that's very important. Some will say that is idealistic. I say no, that is realistic. We are great when we are good. We are great because we are good. Very important point. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And this is a city full of people who will tell you otherwise, who will shake their head and say, well, son, you just don't understand. Well, maybe we do understand. Maybe we understand a truth that's a bit deeper and more profound than expediency. We do not need to choose between being strong and just as a nation. They're not choices. We can and must be both strong and just. Let me close with just a final thought. We live, as you all know, in a very complex world. It's a tough neighborhood. But sometimes choosing the right path is as simple as the advice we were given as children. As simple as the advice we give our children. Do the right thing. Be honest. Be kind. Be just. Thank you.
Thank you, Aram, for those kind words about IDC, but for redirecting our attention to the Armenian community who has suffered so terribly. 102 years ago, the Armenian community began to take root in other places around the Middle East, and Armenian communities can still be found in Egypt, in Iran, in Syria, in Iraq, and of course in Lebanon. And here in America, we have a vibrant and wonderful Armenian community. And I've got a little secret every once in a while when I do get a little bit bored, let's say, with Catholic liturgy. I jump on the metro and I go down to Armenian liturgy. Even though it's substantially longer, it is much. It's very, very beautiful, and of course always welcomed as friends. And so so thank you so much for being here, Aram. Our next speaker is Mark Tooley of the Institute of Religion and Democracy. And a brief word, if I may. These two gentlemen, a couple of years ago, launched a magazine called Providence, and I would recommend that everybody take the time to read through the pages of Providence. It's a marvelous journal of Christianity and foreign policy. And this, I think, is precisely the sort of engagement that is called for among Christians who seek to engage in a positive way in foreign policy, not just in the Middle East, but around the world. And so grateful to them for launching this important journal. And I don't mind saying that in the pages of Providence, one of the deep themes I think that we come back to is the sense of Christian realism, the thought of Reinhold Niebuhr and other Christian realists who would admit that the world is a fallen place. And I think if you look where America often goes astray, it's believing that the tools of government and foreign policy can be used to perfect human nature. And that can be a very dangerous tendency. So I think the idea of getting America once more rooted in that realism, while at the same time pursuing and advancing its own values, I think is very important. So with that plug for Providence, I would like to welcome to the stage Mark Tooley of IRD. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. That was a great plug for Providence. I should have brought some issues with me to pass out. It's a great honor to be here among so many distinguished people for such an important cause. The theme of my very brief talk is, why don't Christians care about Christians? Or more precisely, why do many American Christians not care about overseas persecuted Christians? My organization, the Institute on Religion and Democracy, was founded in 1981 in response to American church elites who ignored or actively apologized for Marxist regimes that persecuted Christians, among many others. They did so because they thought Marxism brought liberation for the poor and because they thought détente and peace were more important than freedom and truth. After the Cold War ended, some of those church groups expressed regret for their silence about persecuted Christians. but the attitude continues in new contexts and unfortunately in even wider circles. Beyond mundane human apathy, which is everywhere, of course, what are the reasons for ongoing silence and indifference about persecuted Christians in the Mideast and around the world by so many American Christians? I've got 4 reasons for you, so listen very closely. First, many American Christians equate Christianity with privilege, power, colonialism, and Western civilization. They conceive of Christians as only the persecutors, never the persecuted. They want to apologize for the Crusades or Western imperialism. Even if they acknowledge there are persecuted Christians around the world, they surmise that Christianity is historically too compromised to merit sympathy, much less advocacy. Secondly, many American Christians romanticize persecution. Ostensibly, in their minds, it will ennoble the church, and it will be an effective tool for evangelism. The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, they sometimes like to say, ignoring that history is full of cultures whose churches were permanently destroyed by persecution. These American Christians who romanticize persecution are, of course, not themselves exposed to persecution, but living in relative privilege and comfort. Third reason, some American Christians equate the cause of religious liberty with the American domestic political right and thereby dismiss it. They also conflate overseas persecuted Christians with domestic American religious liberty conflicts, often involving LGBTQ. They ironically equate religious freedom with prejudice and discrimination, and they prioritize lifestyle freedom and advocacy over religious freedom and advocacy. Reason number 4. Many American Christians believe Christians are selfish for prioritizing other Christians. Christians should not advocate specifically for adherents of their own faith. They should only advocate generically and universally for human rights for all people of all faiths or of no faith without distinctions. That Christians are globally the most persecuted religion does not typically register. They also lack any deep theology about the obligation that attaches to membership in the body of Christ. What are the obligations for members of this body of Christ? We are all part of a single spiritual family whose head is Christ. We are obligated to love and serve each other, sharing in each other's sacrifices. This special love Christians are to have for each other is not selfish or exclusive of non-Christians. Rather, the love that Christians are to have for each other is to be a model and a gift to the rest of the world, exemplifying the love that Jesus has for everybody. Some American Christians are uncomfortable with the idea of special love and particular attachments, whether to church or to family or to marriage or to nation. They think love can only be abstractly universal. But abstract love is no love at all. It must begin with particulars. Christians are called to love all persons, but this universal affection is only possible by starting with the particular affections and regard we are to have, starting with love for our Lord and for his church, especially for its suffering and persecuted members. In Defense of Christians incarnates this particular love that we all should have for persecuted members of our family in the Middle East and around the world. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Our next speaker is Robert Nicholson of the Philos Project. Robert.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, everybody, for coming today. I'd like to wish you a good afternoon. I know we have many distinguished clergy members and members of the press. Welcome. Thank you for coming. So, I want to talk a little bit about why I, as the president of the Philos Project, am supporting this conference. And to do that, I want to talk a little bit about IDC and what I think their role is. So the purpose of this conference is to defend the Christians of the Middle East, but it's more than that. It's more than just defending them. It's also strengthening them, and that's an important point. And we're honored to support the conference and the mission of IDC because it aligns directly with our mission at the Philos Project, which is to promote positive Christian engagement, particularly Western Christian engagement in the Middle East. There was a time, and it wasn't all that long ago, relatively speaking, when the Middle East was actually mostly Christian, as hard as that is to picture. Of course, that time is no more. And today, the Maronite, Syriac, Assyrian, Chaldean, Coptic, Armenian, and other Christian communities have become a super minority in their own homeland, caught between rising religious violence, expansionist regimes, and sectarian warfare. I met Christians on the ground in Iraq, in Jordan and Lebanon who've been traumatized by recent events, and I've heard many awful stories. And I've heard many of them say something like, the Middle East doesn't want us anymore. We don't have a future here. And while I understand that sentiment, and I can't imagine the stories and the events that led up to them saying that, I'm not so pessimistic. And I believe everyone here is dedicated to the proposition that Christians do have a future in the Middle East, that we collectively have a duty to work toward that future, and that together we can move toward an era where Christian communities don't just recoup their losses, which is sometimes the way that we talk about this, but when they can actually begin to grow. Now, that may sound overly optimistic, but I would suggest that there is tangible evidence that such things are possible. 3 years ago, when ISIS overran northern Iraq, I and a handful of other people were walking around this city, around Washington, D.C., talking about the need to prepare for the day when ISIS would be defeated, when Christian areas would be liberated, when Christians would be able to return to their homes, talking about what governance and security should look like, what U.S. government policies were needed to move toward that governance, and how we as leaders in civil society could help. People all over this town said I was crazy, that I was delusional, that me and this small group of people were really being idealistic, and that in reality, Christianity in Iraq was over. The best solution was to airlift them to the West, and maybe they'll find a comfortable life in Chicago. Even last year, when I stood here at the IDC press conference at this very stage and delivered a similar message, I came down from the stage only to find people, and some of them quite prominent, tell me that I was essentially off my rocker. Did I want to put Christians in even more danger? Christians returning to their homes in Iraq? It's impossible. It's over. Of course, that was then, and this is now. Within the last few months and weeks, we've seen ISIS largely defeated, the Iraqi army take huge portions of northern Iraq back from ISIS and from Kurdish soldiers who are occupying areas of indigenous minorities like the Christians. And the Christian towns of Iraq, or many of them, if not most of them, are now free. Now everyone is scrambling to figure out what comes next. Now, we could have had 3 years of planning under our belt by now, but instead we fell victim to this fatalistic and defeatist mentality, and we, I would propose, must break out of that mentality for good. Now, that isn't to say that Christianity is going perfectly in Iraq and that Christians are living in calmness and tranquility. Even today, as we're standing here right now, the Iraqi security forces are battling Kurdish Peshmerga to retake the Assyrian village of Teleskov. And I, as the president of the Philos Project, call on both sides to respect civilian life in the midst of this terrible conflict. I toured Teleskov just 1 year ago, and I know firsthand how much the residents have suffered, and I think they've suffered enough. But let me come back to why the Philos Project is supporting this conference. The first reason, as I said, is because the mission of IDC, the mission of the Philos Project, are directly aligned. Both organizations are working together to prompt constructive Western engagement on behalf of Christians and other minorities in the region. But the second reason has to do with the spirit of IDC. 3 years ago, when we were talking about creating a self-administered province for Christians and planning for post-ISIS Iraq, one of the only organizations that was standing there by our side was IDC. Tawfiq Baklini, Andrew Doran, the board, the staff, had not thrown in the towel and were ready to think big about the future of Christians in the Middle East. IDC, like Philos, is not a defeatist organization. They aren't willing to just give up. They're ready to think creatively, strategically, to build coalitions, to lobby governments, to move the ball down the field. And it's that very spirit of resistance, of determination, even of optimism, tempered with realism, that makes me proud to partner with IDC on this conference and many other things. And that goes for the other partners here on the stage, IRD, the Armenian National Committee of America. These, I think, are the good guys. These are the groups who are ready to stand up, to be tough, to be thoughtful, to make plans, to not assume that the Middle East is doomed and Christians are victims and that nothing can be done about it. These guys are fighters, and that's why I'm honored to be up on the stage with them. It's organizations like these, coalitions like this, that can become movements that change the course of history. So the Middle East used to be Christian. Perhaps it will never be Christian again. We just don't know. But Christians belong in the Middle East as indigenous minorities who predated Jesus Christ, as faithful carriers of that revelation that began at Sinai, that revelation that changed history, that gave birth to the Abrahamic traditions, and that first brought ideas about freedom and equality and pluralism into the world. I, as a Christian, as an evangelical Christian, know that I cannot be any less optimistic than the faith that drives me. Christianity is a religion of hope, and we must tap into that hope as we labor in this, what sometimes feels like the most hopeless of regions. But hope is not enough. We must muster the knowledge, the skills, the vision that has been given to us by God to deploy that hope in practice, navigating the material interests, the geopolitical currents that shape this part of the world in our day. We must be realistic, and we must be wise. And that's the third reason I support IDC. IDC is strategic. They are driven by values, yes, deep values, but they are savvy about interests and about the political process, about actually getting things done. They understand the importance of security, stability, and sovereignty of Lebanon and what that means not only for the country's Christian population, but also the wider region and U.S. foreign policy. They understand the need to hold our regional allies accountable on key issues. They understand the need to provide recognition and relief for victims of genocide, as well as call out and punish those who victimize them. Lastly, I partner with IDC because they treat Middle East Christians as friends and, importantly, as agents in their own story. Unlike some organizations in the West that see Eastern Christians as mere victims who need Western help, IDC sees them as equals and gives them a platform to speak. So these four things, the mission, the spirit, the strategy, the relational approach, these and the optimistic attitude that drives them all are the reason why the Philos Project supports IDC, and we're very proud to do so. Christians of the Middle East will survive. They will survive because we maintain hope, because we insist on truth, and because we work hard to develop values-based friendships that we leverage in strategic ways between our organizations in the U.S. government, between Eastern Christians and Western Christians, and between Christians and our non-Christian friends who also believe in the vision of a pluralistic Middle East. May we live to see that vision become reality, but even if we don't, we must not give up hope. We must plan, on the contrary, for success. We must imagine a day when Christianity, and not just Christianity, is once again flourishing all over a multi-ethnic and multi-religious Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And thank you, Robert, for redirecting this conversation to Iraq. We have Iraqi Christian friends in the room. Mother Olga, not just yet, Mother. But if you will forgive me, but we will certainly take a question. And thank you so much, Mother. So for those members of the media, I think as they arrive, they will have seen IDC's response to the UNDP's October 2017 Iraq stabilization support for the Nineveh Plain. The report was called Iraq Stabilization for Nineveh, and the report claims a number of projects assisting Christian areas. However, there are many problematic assertions in the report and with the projects that it claims. First, most of the projects are prospective and, while planned, have yet to be executed. Second, the possibility of corruption and mismanagement provide a good reason to doubt that these projects will be consistently executed. UN projects in the Nineveh Plain have been rife with problems, as many NGOs and aid organizations have been quick to point out. Projects are often poorly completed and no adequate auditing mechanism is in place to check the quality of the work. And this is a problem that doesn't just plague international aid, but U.S. government aid as well. For example, media reports indicate that recently a school in Tel Skaf was listed as refurbished by the UN. However, this simply meant that the exterior had been repainted. The inside of the school remained in shambles and unusable, while the freshly painted exterior featured a UNICEF logo. It's also notable that about a third of the 161 projects being claimed in the UNDP report as being done in Christian areas are actually being done in areas where no Christians have returned. In addition, at least one major water treatment project has been done in a Christian area, but is likely to benefit only non-Christians in Mosul. UNDP estimates of which towns are Christian or where Christians have returned are inaccurate, I'm afraid. The Christian areas overwhelmingly need rebuilding of infrastructure, water, power, roads, and so forth. as well as construction assistance to make housing damaged by ISIS or in conflict against ISIS once more habitable. However, less than 2% of the houses needing 2% of the housing needs of the Christian community are being addressed, and power is still not being planned for in some of these areas. And you can see at greater length the concerns raised in this report, particularly in Tel Kaif, Betnaya, Al-Kosh, and other places in the Nineveh Plain in northern Iraq. So it's not IDC's purpose here to outright condemn UNDP, but we would call on them to respond point by point to the response that we've given to their report. And I think that's certainly reasonable. And I think it's also important for the American people to ask questions about how aid is getting to Christians in the Middle East. We have machinery, quite simply, with foreign aid that's broken, and this really came to light in 2011 with the quadrennial report on foreign aid undertaken at the State Department. There was no accountability. There was no tracking of funds. This has been a real problem. American taxpayer money ends up in the hands of dictators, of regimes, of corrupt aid organizations, and I think it's certainly reasonable for the American people to ask for an accounting of the money that goes through the United Nations, supposedly to victims. The American people's representatives in Congress have voted for aid to be given swiftly and directly to the Christians of Iraq, and we've just seen over the last several months bills languishing in the Senate, and this is simply inexcusable for America's leaders to just politicize something as important as getting aid to Christians in Iraq and Syria, genocide victims. Our government has recognized genocide, and yet very little is being done. And so with all due respect to those people of goodwill at the United Nations and UNDP who are in good faith doing good work, it's certainly reasonable for the American people who have taken, we believe, an interest in the Christians of the Middle East, particularly those genocide victims, to hold accountable our government to ensure that our public servants get aid to those who most urgently need it. And so with that, we will take a few questions. And the first question is going to come from Mother Olga, who is from Iraq and does have her heart very much still there, although we're glad that she's with us here in America. Mother, please.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm grateful to you and Tawfiq and the IDC staff for giving me this opportunity to share just a couple of clarifications. So my name is Mother Olga of the Sacred Heart, born and raised in Iraq. Though we are here, thanks be to God, to raise awareness about the persecuted Christians in Middle East, I just want to encourage us to keep in mind that there is a uniqueness about each country and each nation and what they've been through. That's why I want to offer just clarification on behalf of my people regarding two questions they were asked earlier. One of the questions was whether the secularization of our country here in the United States, or the word also was used, anti-Christians, has affected how we are, the Christians in Middle East are getting help. I won't say that it's about the secularization of our culture and time that we live in here in the West, but I would say mostly what I have found, it's maybe even if it's not intentionally, but it's still affecting the Christians in Middle East, is the ignorance that we have about the history of that part of the world. Often when people see me as religious sisters, they ask me, are you a Yazidi? Or when you converted from Islam? With all my respects to my brothers and sisters in the Yazidi community and Muslim community in Iraq, but too many people, including the American sisters in my own community, they don't know that Iraq was 100% Christian. We have the ruins of the first church that was built by St. Thomas the Apostle in 67 after Jesus. So I feel the pain that the Iraqi people and all the Christians of Middle East struggle with is the ignorance about their history and who they are as people and the heritage that they have in that land. The other question was brought up also about whether should we have a safe region for all the Christians. I cannot speak about Lebanese or the Syrian or the Egyptian or Nigerian, but I can speak about the Iraqi people. I remember in the Archdiocese of Boston and maybe other dioceses here in the United States, when because of whether economical situation or lack of vocations, they start merging parishes and closing at time parishes. People were so angry. People left the church. They said, in this church, my grandparents were married. My children got baptized here. I know one church in Boston, they rallied in that church for 7 years and appealed to Rome during those 7 years not to be closed. And the Christians of Iraq are people of the first century of Christianity. We have monasteries up in the mountains from the 2nd century, and we expect that it will be easy for those people to leave their land. The other example I can give you, when ISIS entered Mosul 3 years ago, as you know, all the Christians flowed from their villages, and they went up to the north. Those of you who don't know that part of the history, when Kurdistan got separated, not by borders, but they had their own region since 1993, the main language in universities became Kurdish. They didn't want anything to do with Arabic. And then a lot of young people from those Christian villages in Mosul, after the University of Mosul was closed, they went up to the Kurdistan area. They couldn't continue their education because simply they didn't know Kurdish. They had to leave their homes again and their families in Kurdistan, come to Kirkuk. I know firsthand, I help them. There are currently 600 college students in Kirkuk separated from their families up in Kurdistan area because they wanted to continue their education. And Bishop Yusuf Toma, the Archbishop of Kirkuk, is funding their education. It's not an easy solution to say, let us move from this region to this region. And even after the villages were liberated, thanks be to God, it wasn't even 2 months difference between that time when the bishops and patriarchs were scrambling to find help to rebuild those villages so Christians can come back to their villages. Kurdistan region decided to have a vote and be an independent country. We, the Christians of Iraq, are lost in the middle between the Arab and the Kurds. The bishop of Kirkuk, he has 2 eparchies or 2 dioceses, one in Kirkuk, one in Sulaymaniyah. One is under Baghdad government, one is under the Kurds government. So that is what, in my opinion, and my relationship with IDC, what they are trying to do to raise awareness and raise advocacy on behalf of those people. So please, my brothers and sisters, it's not an easy solution to say, let's take them all from there. These people who have their roots there, they won't survive. When you take a fish out of water, will die. And the last thing I want to clarify, some people have asked me personally, not here in the summit, when they hear about the reality of Christians in Iraq, they say, why Christians didn't do something for themselves to defend their churches, to defend their lives? I'm a daughter of an Armenian mother and an Assyrian father. Both parents lost everyone in their family to the genocide. I know how much my people in Iraq have suffered. For the last 37 years since the war between Iraq and Iran, and then Kuwait, and then first Desert War, then 10 years embargo, and then second Desert War, my family, I'm one of the 9 children, and I'm the only one chose to be educated. Because my siblings said, why study when we all gonna die? So we have to see their life from the inside before making any quick solution or conclusion. So please, as we spend this time here, these 3 days, with In Defense of Christian Summit, let us take that to heart and raise awareness about the history of those nations and the history of their church. We need to raise awareness and educate our American people about the history of that part of the world. It's not the secularization or anti-Christianity. I remember just a month ago with what happened between Kurdistan and the government of Iraq. I asked a lot of people in Boston, they didn't know what was going on because all the headlines were about NFL players and who's kneeling and who's standing for weeks and weeks. So please, my brothers and sisters, take to heart these messages and go out and educate people how we can keep the Christianity alive. Yes, I have hope because as one of the patriarchs said, the Church of Jesus Christ is built on the blood of martyrs, and the Holy Spirit is alive and will be always the same of yesterday, today, and forever. But how we can do that with less loss of lives and suffering, especially for children. Thank you, Andrew, for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Mother, for those beautiful words. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just time for a couple of questions. Please.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys for such a wonderful panel. And Mother Olga, your words touched me quite a bit. My name is Antoinette Balta. I'm a Lebanese American. I live in Los Angeles. I'm an attorney. And some of the things that you spoke yourself resonated deeply within me. And one of them, as the daughter of Lebanese immigrants, is I often hear, well, if I give you money to send overseas, how do I know it's going to get there? And I always thought, wow, that's so pessimistic until I saw myself, money that my family had sent, was misused in Lebanon and in Syria. So I'm very impressed that IDC has seemed to take perhaps an unofficial watchdog position. And I'm curious to know more about whether or not you are going to develop an arm to become more of a watchdog organizations for places like UNDP and maybe other nonprofits that are sending money to our homelands to perhaps allow people to regain faith in the system to give more funds to our brothers and sisters back home.
That's an excellent question. Thank you so much, Antoinette, and welcome, and thank you so much for being here. If I were to be candid for a moment, I would say we have, in 3 years, bitten off far more than we could possibly chew. People often say, you know, for the size of your organization, you're really punching out of your weight class, and I take a lot of pride in that. But I'm also humbled by the very kind words that we've heard here today. IDC doesn't do humanitarian aid, so we are in a unique position to be a platform for information coming from organizations that do, organizations who may say, we know how to do this, you know, the right way, and we're seeing other organizations or, you know, organizations, international organizations like the United Nations who are not necessarily doing it effectively, and it is important to do it effectively. I don't know. I think that would be a wonderful long-term project for IDC to have a greater role in oversight. It would require a lot of coordination, but I think we're seeing it with the NGOs we're working with on the ground, and we're happy to compile and publish these sorts of reports because this kind of accountability is so very important. And it's very important for the American people to understand that for decades, American aid around the world has not ended up in the hands of the people the American people wanted it to end up with, those most in need. Years ago, I was talking to an American Foreign Service officer in an African country. He himself was African American, grew up in an inner city in Philadelphia, and had the highest of ideals when he joined the Foreign Service in the early 1980s. And as I sat in an embassy in sub-Saharan Africa, he said to me that he had really lost heart in not just the host country, but disappointment that he felt America was being exploited as it sent more and more money that was ending up in Swiss bank accounts or European accounts, the very few at the top stealing American taxpayer dollars and using it to exploit the weak, those intended recipients of its aid. And if you ever get a chance to read the quadrennial review that was published in 2010 or 2011 on American foreign aid, there is virtually zero accountability, even within our own government, about how where aid goes, where it ends up. We're starting to turn a corner, I think very slowly and far too late in the game. I think we have to ask, one honest question about U.S. government foreign aid. Has it, in some instances, done more harm than good? And so we're proud to publish reports like this and to work with our NGO partners. A lot of times going around on the ground, we are working with private Christian aid organizations who are doing a lot of good on the ground, and we see the good work that they do, and we want to promote that sort of work. And if we can continue to publish reports like this, to hold international organizations and our own government accountable to make sure that the aid of the U.S. taxpayers gets to the people who deserve it and who need it, then we'd be happy to do so. I hope that answers your question, probably a little long-windedly. Sorry. Thank you, Antoinette. Ma'am, please.
I'm also from Iraq, Kirkuk, as a matter of fact, and I agree 100% with Sister about the atrocities that ISIS has done to the Christian community. Mosul fell, and my cousins who were in Kirkuk finally, after convincing them to leave 3 years ago, left Kirkuk, left their homes, left everything behind, and are stranded in Lebanon, Beirut, Lebanon, in the past 3 years. According to United Nations, they don't even qualify as refugees because they are Christians. Iraqi Christians do not qualify as refugees, which is a shame. So they are stranded. And then right now, if they decide to go back, which they have nothing, obviously there's nothing left there, if they go back, what is the guarantee that in a few years, same thing won't happen, especially now with the Kurdish uprising, again, in Kirkuk. So how could the rest of the Christian guarantee these Christians that, yes, next time if atrocities happen, we will protect you? We need to hear that. We need to know that. We need the Christian world to get together to say, yes, we will help the Christians in Iraq, especially being the early original Christians that live there. And that's my thing. Again, I don't know what to say to my cousins because there's 5 members are stranded in Lebanon. Yeah. And their father was killed because of the war. A bomb just blew up and he killed him, a young man of age 45. So this is our situation. We're not lying. We're not exaggerating. Everything you hear is the truth, and it's even worse than you expect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nourik, and thank you so much for being here. Like Robert, in 2015 and then again earlier this year, I was in Teleskov, and where there's fighting going on. Even as a friend of mine texted me as I was on the stage, which is heartbreaking. I thought when I was there earlier this summer in Teleskov on the Nineveh Plain, I was just in complete awe of the Christians there who were rebuilding, who were back. The church had been used for target practice, and it had been headquarters for ISIS when they briefly occupied Teleskov before retreating back to Batnaya. And Batnaya was completely destroyed, and it was devastating. It was heartbreaking. But the Christians were going back to Teleskov, and they were rebuilding. And this is July, I think. And I looked at them, and I thought, I would not have the courage to do this. I don't know what I would do. I would pack up. I would leave. And there they were, the most courageous people in the world, rebuilding in the midst of that terror that they lived through. It's hard to know where to start when it's time to rebuild. And I think that that's something of a metaphor for us when we're addressing the question of Christians and U.S. foreign policy. You know, you look around and you think, what can I do? I feel so helpless. When I'm talking to someone like you, Nourik, from Iraq, of Armenian and Assyrian descent, my answer is go back home, and when you get there, make friends with the pastors of the Catholic, evangelical churches, sit down with them, get a cup of coffee, and tell them your story, and say, I want to tell you the story of my people, of my ancestors. And maybe they'll invite you to tell that story to their congregation. And I would really welcome everybody to do this. I know that for so many of you, it's traumatizing to be dislocated, to be uprooted, and to wind up here so many thousands of miles from home. I can only imagine, frankly. I can't say I know. I can only imagine how hard that must be for you. My grandparents did it, and I know how hard it was for them, but I don't know personally. All I can say is that don't be overwhelmed by that helplessness, because there really is an opportunity to, for those of you who've come so far to this conference, to go back to where you come from and talk to the people in your community and tell the story. And this is the way that that we begin to fight the ignorance that Mother Olga is talking about. I hope that answers your question, Rick.
I think so.
Thank you. I think we have time for. I'm sorry, I've fielded all the questions now instead of for our panelists. So let's take. We were out of time. Oh, Father, how about a quick one, please?
I'm Father John Anderson. I'm with the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Antioch in North America. I've got a question kind of along the lines of what Mr. Nicholson was doing. Is who is thinking ahead and who is planning ahead for the future of the Christians and other minorities in the Middle East? I'm a retired United States Army chaplain, and I can tell you, having gone in and out of Kosovo several times, when you leave the governments in charge and they're not talking to all the populations, what's left is not ideal. And organizations such as yours, the heads of the religious minorities, particularly the religious minorities, need to be heard. But IDC and other organizations seem to be able to get the ear of political entities and people much quicker. And is anybody working on those issues, on what the future end state looks like?
Thank you so much, Father. I'm going to let each of the panelists take a turn to respond, beginning with Aram.
Not enough, folks. I know that Philos Project, I know IDC, imagine IRD as well, but clearly not enough. I think most people are in crisis mode, and unfortunately the discussion has been about sort of the next day, not the next year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, you know, the people on this stage and maybe a few others, I think when people talk about this, it tends to be in the mode of victimization, which leads to just humanitarian relief answers, all of which are needed. But there's very few people in this, let's call it the persecuted Christian space, who want to go to that next level and say, okay, what, you know, to this question about, you know, Kirkuk and these areas that have, I mean, there needs to be some sort of governance, security, even affirmative action, political action that's done to make sure that these communities do have a guarantee to come home, because nobody will otherwise. You can hope for it, dream for it, ask for it, beg for it, but unless people see tangible stuff, then it's very hard. I think IDC is doing a phenomenal job on that, yeah, I was in Budapest. The government of Hungary has dedicated a special ministry to work on the issue. It's the only government in the world, to my knowledge, that's actually said, okay, this is an important issue, we're going to spend time and money on it. And so I think when you think about governments in the world, I think Hungary, you know, it's just a small thing right now, but I think it's really leading the way, and I'd like to see other governments follow suit.
I'll just echo the comments of my colleagues. I am, and we talk about this a lot, it's demoralizing, the absence of any sort of strategic vision in the U.S. government. Everybody's drinking from a fire hose, as they say. There's not really any sort of coordinated strategy. Everything has been tactics for over 15 years, and I think this is true militarily. I think it's just, as Aram said, like crisis response mode all the time, but nobody is thinking deeply or strategically at any level, and it's aggressively frustrating. It really, really is. And one point that Robert made that I'd just like to follow up on, there is an inclination, I think, that Americans have. I won't say Westerners, because I think the European understanding of Christianity in the Middle East is different, and it's more accurate. Americans have this tendency to regard Middle East Christians as enfeebled or as victims, and there are several stock photos of Christians a Christian woman maybe in the back of a church, crying out, screaming, a look of helplessness. Now, on the one hand, this helps to raise awareness and to we hope encourage people to become active. But on the other hand, it does show, as Robert said, a victim narrative. That has not been my experience of Middle East Christianity at all. Quite the contrary. The Christians I meet are multilingual, multicultural, very well educated, very thoughtful, very refined, very often successful, committed to their families. In other words, leaders in their communities, and among the best and the brightest. And this is also a part of the Middle East Christianity which we have to convey to Americans. But to come back to the thrust of your question, I don't see much in the way of strategic vision. We have had some success, but in terms of trying to help shape the discussion, but it's extremely hard. And it's going to take years, decades. It took us decades to get where we are, and it's going to take us decades to climb out. I hope that answers your question. Thank you for your service, Father. Thank you.
I would just encourage you, gentlemen, you and your colleagues, religious leaders don't provide affirmative leadership, you will not like the result.
Yeah. Thank you, Father. And with that, Ninar is telling me that we have to conclude. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here today. And we hope you'll join us at our next event at the at St. Matthew's Cathedral at 6:40, beginning with Abir Neme and our ecumenical prayer service. Thank you so much.